My name is Judy, and I'm 55 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in my kitchen staring at this phone that changed everything. Just 3 hours ago, I thought my son Marcus was the blessing that kept me going after losing my husband. I believed he was the one person in this world who truly loved me. But sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Sometimes a forgotten phone call can shatter 28 years of motherhood in just 5 minutes. Before I share what I heard on that call, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe because the story about betrayal and taking back control might just save someone else from making my mistakes. Now, let me tell you about the phone call that ended my role as a forgiving mother forever. 3 years ago, my world collapsed when my husband Robert died in a car accident on Interstate 25. We had been married for 32 years, and suddenly I was alone in our three-bedroom house in the suburbs of Denver. The silence was deafening. Robert had been my anchor, my partner in everything, and without him I felt like I was drifting in an endless ocean. But I had Marcus, my beautiful intelligent son, who had just graduated summa cum laude from the University of Colorado with a degree in computer engineering. At 28, he was everything a mother could hope for. He had landed a job at a tech company downtown, making $65,000 a year, which seemed like a fortune to me. More importantly, he was kind, caring, and still called me every week to check in. I continued working at the Denver Public Library, where I had been employed for 25 years. The routine helped me cope with the grief, cataloging books, helping patrons find information, organizing reading programs for children. It gave my days structure and purpose. My colleagues were supportive, always asking about Marcus and sharing in my pride when I talked about his accomplishments. Our house had been paid off 2 years before Robert died, thanks to his careful financial planning. It was a modest ranch-style home with a small backyard garden where I grew tomatoes and roses. The basement had been converted into a comfortable living space where Marcus stayed whenever he came to visit, which was usually once a month. He would bring takeout from our favorite Chinese restaurant, and we would sit in the living room talking about his work, his girlfriend Sarah, and his plans for the future. After Robert's death, the life insurance payout was $310,000. Combined with the house, which was valued at approximately $280,000, according to recent market assessments, plus our retirement savings and some stock investments Robert had made, my total net worth was around $600,000. Not wealthy by any means, but enough to ensure I could live comfortably for the rest of my life. I had updated my will shortly after Robert's funeral, leaving everything to Marcus. He was my only child, my only living family, except for my sister Helen, who lived in Phoenix. During one of our dinner conversations, I had mentioned this to Marcus, wanting him to know that his future was secure. His reaction had been perfect. He hugged me and said he hoped that day was very far in the future, that he would rather have me around than any inheritance. That response had filled my heart with warmth. I felt blessed to have raised such a thoughtful, caring son. My friends at the library often complained about their adult children being distant or only calling when they needed money. But Marcus was different. He genuinely seemed to care about my well-being, always asking about my health, my work, whether I needed help with anything around the house. He had been dating Sarah for 2 years, and she seemed like a sweet girl. She was 26, worked as a dental hygienist, and always treated me with respect and kindness. They talked about getting married someday, maybe buying a house together. I enjoyed hearing about their plans and felt hopeful about Marcus's future happiness. The grief of losing Robert was still raw, but having Marcus in my life made it bearable. I looked forward to his weekly phone calls, to his monthly visits, to being part of his journey into adulthood and eventual parenthood. I imagined grandchildren running through my house, family holidays filled with laughter and love. Little did I know that while I was building dreams around my son's presence in my life, he was making entirely different plans that would shatter everything I believed about our relationship. About 2 months before that devastating phone call, I started noticing subtle changes in Marcus's behavior. At first, they seemed innocuous, even caring. He began asking questions about my finances that I initially interpreted as concern for my welfare. It started during one of his regular visits in early August. We were having dinner when he casually asked, "Mom, are you managing okay financially? I mean, with just your library salary and everything?" I assured him I was fine, that Robert had left me well provided for. But instead of dropping the subject, Marcus pressed further. "Have you thought about what you'll do when you retire? This house is pretty big for one person." I found his questions a bit odd, but assumed he was simply being a thoughtful son planning ahead for my care as I aged. After all, wasn't that what good children did? Look out for their parents' future needs, but the questions became more frequent and more specific. During our phone conversations, he would ask things like, "Do you know what the house is worth now?" And, "Have you considered downsizing to something more manageable?" When I asked why he was so interested, he would say he was just worried about me living alone in such a big house, concerned about my safety and comfort. Then Sarah began joining these conversations. Whenever she was with Marcus during our calls, she would chime in with comments about senior living communities and the benefits of having professional care available. "Auntie Judy," she would say in her sweet voice, "Marcus and I just want to make sure you're thinking about the future. What if you need help someday and we're not available immediately?" Their concern felt overwhelming and premature. I was only 55 in excellent health, still working full-time and perfectly capable of managing my own life. I had neighbors I was friendly with. My sister Helen was just a phone call away, and I felt comfortable and happy in my home. Why were they so worried about my needing care? One evening in late August, Marcus brought up the subject again, but this time with a concrete suggestion. Mom Sarah and I found this amazing senior community about 15 minutes from where we live. It's not a nursing home or anything like that. It's independent living with optional services. We thought maybe we could take you to see it just to get an idea of what's available. I politely declined, explaining that I wasn't ready to think about such changes. I loved my house, my neighborhood, my independence. But instead of understanding, Marcus seemed frustrated by my response. "Mom, you're not being realistic. You need to start planning for the future." The conversation left me feeling unsettled. When had my capable, independent son started viewing me as someone who needed to be managed? I called my sister Helen that night and told her about the conversation. Her response was immediate and sharp. "Judy, that doesn't sound right. You're perfectly fine living on your own. Why is Marcus so interested in moving you out of your house?" I defended Marcus, explaining that he was just being caring and forward-thinking, but Helen's words planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. A few weeks later, Marcus suggested we meet with a financial advisor to optimize my financial planning. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The meeting was held at a downtown office, and the advisor, a smooth-talking man in his 40s, presented various strategies for wealth preservation and transfer. Much of what he said was over my head, but I noticed Marcus taking detailed notes and asking very specific questions about property transfer procedures, tax implications, and trust fund establishment. The advisor seemed to be speaking more to Marcus than to me, as if I were just a bystander in discussions about my own financial future. After the meeting, I felt confused and somewhat manipulated. Why had Marcus wanted me to hear all this complex information about estate planning and asset transfer? Was he really just being helpful, or was there something else going on? My doubts deepened when I discovered that Marcus had printed several documents from my computer during one of his visits. When I found the printouts, they included my bank statements, insurance policies, and property tax assessments. When I asked him about it, he explained that he wanted to help me organize my paperwork better, make sure I had copies of everything in case of emergency. The explanation seemed reasonable, but something about it felt wrong. These were private documents, and he had accessed them without asking permission. The Marcus had raised would never have done something like that without discussing it with me first. By September, Marcus's behavior had escalated from concerning to alarming. He was no longer making gentle suggestions about my future living arrangements. Instead, he was presenting what felt like ultimatums disguised as loving concern. During a visit in early September, he arrived with a folder full of brochures and printed information about senior living communities. Mom Sarah and I have been doing research and we really think you need to seriously consider making a move. Living alone in this big house isn't safe for someone your age. I was taken aback by his directness. Someone my age, Marcus, I'm 55, not 75. I'm perfectly capable of living independently. But he persisted, spreading the brochures across my kitchen table like a real estate agent making a sales pitch. Look at these amenities, Mom. You'd have a community of people your own age, activities, meals provided if you want them, medical care available 24/7. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance, yard work, any of that. Sarah, who had come with him, added her voice to the campaign. Auntie Judy, we've actually visited a few of these places and they're really nice. The people seem happy and engaged. You might make some wonderful new friends. I felt like I was being tag-teamed, pressured from both sides. I appreciate your concern, but I'm not ready for this conversation. I love my house, I love my neighborhood, and I'm not interested in moving right now. Marcus's reaction was swift and sharp. Mom, you're being stubborn and unrealistic. You can't live in denial forever. What if something happens to you? What if you fall and no one finds you for days? What if you have a medical emergency? His words stung. When had my son started speaking to me like I was a confused child instead of his capable, intelligent mother? Marcus, those are possibilities for anyone at any age. I could just as easily have an accident at 55 as at 75. That's not a reason to give up my independence. The argument that followed was the worst we'd ever had. Marcus accused me of being selfish, of not considering how much stress my living situation was causing him and Sarah. We worry about you constantly, Mom. Every day we wonder if you're okay if something's happened. Don't you think you owe it to us to make choices that give us peace of mind? I was stunned by this manipulation. Since when had my well-being become secondary to their peace of mind? Since when had I become responsible for managing their anxiety about normal life risks? The conversation ended with Marcus leaving in frustration, saying he hoped I would come to my senses before it was too late. I spent that evening feeling shaken and confused. Was I really being unreasonable? Was my desire to stay in my own home truly selfish? A few days later, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door with disturbing news. She had seen Marcus and an unfamiliar man walking around my property the previous afternoon, taking photographs and measurements. They had been there for over an hour, examining the foundation, the roof, the landscaping. When I confronted Marcus about this, his explanation was smooth but unconvincing. Oh, that was Uncle Frank. I asked him to take a look at the house and give me an idea of its current market value. I thought it would be helpful information for you to have when you're making decisions about your future. But he had done this without telling me, without asking my permission to have someone evaluate my property. Frank was Robert's brother, someone I had never been particularly close to, and I couldn't understand why Marcus would involve him in my personal business. That night, I called Helen and told her everything that had been happening. Her response was immediate and alarming. Judy, this isn't concern. This is manipulation. Marcus is systematically working to convince you that you're incapable of managing your own life so he can take control of your assets. Helen, that's my son you're talking about. He wouldn't do something like that. Wouldn't he think about it, Judy? He's asking about your finances, pressuring you to move, having your property appraised without permission, involving relatives in your personal business. These aren't the actions of a caring son. These are the actions of someone with an agenda. I didn't want to believe Helen's assessment, but I couldn't deny the pattern she was describing. The Marcus I had raised, the son I had loved and sacrificed for, seemed to have been replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone who saw me not as his mother, but as an obstacle to his own plans. The realization was devastating, but it was about to get much worse. Tuesday, October 18th, started like any other day. I was at the library working on a new display for National Novel Writing Month when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's name, and despite our recent tensions, I felt a small surge of hope. Maybe he was calling to apologize to return to the loving relationship we had always shared. I answered on the third ring. "Hello, Marcus?" But there was no response. Instead, I heard background noise, muffled sounds, like the phone was in a pocket or sitting on a table. I realized Marcus had accidentally called me, probably pocket-dialed, while his phone was in his jacket. I was about to hang up when I heard his voice clear and distinct. He was talking to someone, and I recognized Sarah's voice responding. My finger hovered over the end call button, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was the recent weeks of strange behavior, but I found myself listening. "Sarah, I think Mom's getting close to breaking. She's been under a lot of pressure lately, and I think she's starting to realize she can't handle living alone much longer." My heart stopped. Breaking. What did he mean by that? I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "Are you sure Marcus? Auntie Judy seemed pretty determined when we talked to her last week." Sarah replied. "Trust me, I know my mother. She's stubborn, but she's not stupid. She's starting to see that we're right about her needing more support. And once she agrees to move into assisted living, we can put the house on the market." The words hit me like a physical blow. Put the house on the market, my house. I felt dizzy, gripping the edge of my desk to steady myself. "But what if she doesn't agree?" Sarah asked. Marcus's laugh was cold, a sound I had never heard from my son before. "She will. And if she doesn't, well, we have other options. I've already talked to Uncle Frank about backing me up if I need to pursue legal action." Legal action for what? To have her declared mentally incompetent to manage her own affairs. Frank would testify that he's concerned about her decision-making, her ability to live safely alone. With the right documentation, I could get guardianship and make the decisions for her. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My own son was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent, to steal my independence, my home, my entire life. "Marcus, that seems really extreme. Your mom isn't incompetent." "Sarah, you don't understand the bigger picture here. That house is worth almost $300,000. The life insurance money, her savings, everything together, we're talking about more than $500,000. We need that money to start our lives together, to buy our own house, to have the wedding we want. But that money belongs to your mother. For now it does, but eventually it's all going to be mine anyway. I'm just speeding up the timeline a little bit. Mom's going to live for another 20 or 30 years. I can't wait that long to access what's rightfully mine." The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. He was talking about my life, my future, as if I were already dead, as if my remaining years were just an inconvenience preventing him from getting what he wanted. "Don't you feel bad about doing this to her?" Sarah asked quietly. There was a pause, and for a moment I hoped Marcus would show some trace of the son I had raised, some hint of conscience or regret. "Look, Sarah, you need to understand something. I've been taking care of my mother emotionally since Dad died. Do you know how exhausting it is to call her every week, to visit every month, to constantly worry about whether she's okay? I've put my life on hold long enough. I deserve to have my own future, my own happiness." Taking care of me. The weekly phone calls I treasured, the monthly visits I looked forward to. He saw them as burdens, as obstacles to his happiness. Every expression of love, every moment of connection I thought we shared, had been an act, a performance designed to keep me compliant while he planned my destruction. "I just feel like there should be another way," Sarah said. "There is no other way. Mom is selfish and stubborn. She'd rather cling to that house and her independence than think about what's best for everyone. Well, I'm not going to let her selfishness ruin our future anymore." That was the moment I hung up. I sat in my office at the library, surrounded by books and the quiet hum of normal life, and felt my entire world crumble. The son I had loved, sacrificed for, been proud of, saw me as nothing more than a selfish obstacle to his ambitions. 28 years of motherhood, of putting his needs before my own, of celebrating his successes, and supporting him through challenges. And this was how he truly felt about me. I was a burden. He was tired of carrying an inconvenience he was ready to eliminate. I left work early that day telling my supervisor I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a lie. I felt physically sick, emotionally shattered, completely devastated. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from what I had heard. How long had Marcus been planning this? How long had he been pretending to love me, while secretly resenting every moment he spent caring for his grieving mother? But as I sat in my living room surrounded by the memories and mementos of our family life, the shock began to transform into something more powerful. For the first time in 3 years since Robert's death, I felt absolutely clear about what I needed to do. I called Helen immediately and told her everything I had heard. Her reaction was swift and decisive. "Judy, you need to protect yourself right now, today. Don't wait until tomorrow, don't think about it overnight. Marcus is planning to steal your entire life and you need to stop him." "But Helen, he's my son. How can I fight against my own child? He stopped being your child the moment he decided to betray you. Right now he's a predator and you're his target. You need to think like a survivor, not like a mother." Helen's words were harsh but necessary. I realized that continuing to see Marcus as my beloved son was exactly what would allow him to succeed in destroying me. I needed to see him for what he had revealed himself to be: someone who was willing to steal my independence, my home, and my dignity for his own financial gain. My first call was to Mr. Davidson, the family attorney who had handled Robert's estate. I explained the situation and asked for an emergency appointment the next morning. "Mrs. Thompson, what you're describing sounds like elder abuse, even though you're certainly not elderly. Your son is attempting to financially exploit you through coercion and potentially fraud. We need to take immediate action to protect you." "What kind of action?" "First, we're going to change your will and your beneficiaries. If Marcus is planning to gain control of your assets through manipulation or legal action, we need to make sure those assets go to people who actually care about your well-being." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house, looking at the photos of Marcus growing up, remembering all the moments I had treasured. His first steps in the living room, teaching him to ride a bike in the driveway, helping him with homework at the kitchen table. Had any of it meant anything to him? Or had I been raising a stranger who was just waiting for the right moment to cash in on my love? The next morning, I met with Mr. Davidson and signed a new will. Instead of leaving everything to Marcus, I split my estate between Helen and several charities that meant something to me. The animal shelter, where Robert and I had adopted our dog years ago, the literacy program at the library, and a scholarship fund for children who had lost parents. I left Marcus exactly $10,000. Enough to show that I hadn't forgotten him in my will, but not enough to reward his betrayal and cruelty. "Mrs. Thompson, I also recommend that you document everything Marcus has been doing. Keep records of his attempts to pressure you, any witnesses to his behavior, copies of any communications. If he does try to have you declared incompetent, you'll need evidence to show his real motivations." I felt stronger leaving that office than I had in months. For the first time since Robert's death, I was taking control of my own life instead of just reacting to circumstances. Marcus thought he was dealing with a weak, confused old woman who could be easily manipulated. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. Thursday evening, Marcus called with his usual weekly check-in, his voice warm and caring, exactly like the son I had always believed him to be. "Hi, Mom, how was your week?" "It was fine, Marcus. How are you and Sarah doing?" "We're good. Actually, Mom, I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the senior living communities. Sarah and I found a really beautiful place that I think you'd love. Would you be willing to take a look at it this weekend?" I kept my voice calm and neutral. "Marcus, I'd like to talk to you about that and some other things. Could you come over tonight? I'll make dinner. Sure, Mom, that sounds great. I'll bring dessert. After I hung up, I set up a small digital recorder that Mr. Davidson had recommended. If Marcus was going to reveal his true intentions, I wanted to have proof. He arrived at 7 o'clock with a box of pastries from my favorite bakery and that familiar loving smile that had fooled me for so long. We ate dinner and made small talk about his work and the weather just like we always had. But now I could see through the performance. I could hear the calculation behind every caring word. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with coffee, I decided to give him one last chance to be honest with me. Marcus, I need to ask you something directly. Are you really concerned about my welfare? Or are you more concerned about gaining access to my assets? His expression didn't change, but I caught a brief flicker of something, surprise maybe, or calculation. Mom, what kind of question is that? Of course I'm concerned about your welfare. You're my mother. Then why have you been having my house appraised without my knowledge? Why have you been discussing legal options with Uncle Frank? Why are you so determined to get me out of my home? Now his mask began to slip. His voice became colder, more defensive. Mom, I'm trying to help you plan for the future. Someone has to think practically about these things. Whose future are you planning for, Marcus, mine or yours? The pretense finally dropped. Marcus set down his coffee cup and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Cold, calculating, and utterly without love. Fine. You want to know the truth? Yes, I think you should move into assisted living. Yes, I think this house is too big and too much responsibility for you. And yes, I think the money from selling it could be put to better use, helping me and Sarah build our future. Put to better use. It's my house, Marcus. It's my money. For now it is. But Mom, let's be realistic. You're going to leave it all to me eventually anyway. I'm just suggesting we make the transition, while you can still enjoy knowing you're helping your son succeed. The manipulation was breathtaking in its brazenness. He was actually trying to convince me that stealing my independence was a favor he was doing for me. And if I don't agree, Marcus's smile was cold and predatory. Then I'll have to explore other options. I've been documenting concerning changes in your behavior, Mom. Your increased isolation, your stubborn refusal to consider reasonable safety measures, your inability to make rational decisions about your future. Uncle Frank has noticed these changes too. You're planning to have me declared incompetent. I'm planning to make sure you get the care and supervision you need, even if you're too confused to recognize that you need it. The recorder was capturing every word, every revelation of his true character. I looked at this man who had grown in my body, whom I had nursed and raised and loved unconditionally, and realized I was looking at a stranger, a dangerous stranger, who was willing to destroy my life for his own gain. Get out of my house. What? You heard me. Get out of my house right now. Marcus stood up slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to anger. Mom, you're making a big mistake. I'm trying to help you and you're too stubborn to see it. The only mistake I made was trusting you. The only mistake I made was believing that the son I raised still existed somewhere inside the person you've become. Fine. But this isn't over, Mom. I'm not going to stand by and watch you make decisions that hurt both of us. There is no us anymore, Marcus. You ended that when you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I sat in my living room listening to the silence, and for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. The pretending was over. The manipulation was over. The relationship was over. Now I could focus on protecting myself from the predator my son had become. In the weeks that followed, Marcus made good on his threats. He contacted Uncle Frank and began spreading stories about my declining mental state, my poor judgment, my need for supervision and care. He told people I was becoming confused, making irrational decisions, possibly suffering from early dementia. But I was ready for him. Mr. Davidson had helped me gather evidence of Marcus's real motivations. We had the recording of our confrontation, documentation of his financial interest in my assets, and testimony from neighbors who had witnessed his behavior. When Frank came to my house, ostensibly to check on my welfare, I played him the recording of Marcus discussing their plan to have me declared incompetent. Frank left quickly and quietly, knowing that any legal action would now be seen for what it really was, a conspiracy to commit fraud. Marcus tried calling several times, his voice messages alternating between fake concern and barely controlled anger. "Mom, people are worried about you. You're not acting like yourself. Please call me back so we can work this out." But I was acting exactly like myself, perhaps for the first time in years. I was acting like a strong, independent woman who refused to be victimized by someone who was supposed to love and protect her. I began reclaiming my life in ways I hadn't even realized I had lost. Without the constant pressure and manipulation from Marcus, I felt lighter, freer, more energetic. I started spending more time with friends at work, joined a book club at the library, and began taking art classes at the community center. Helen came to visit for a long weekend, and we grew closer than we had been since childhood. "Judy, I have to tell you something. You look happier now than you have since before Robert died. It's like you've come back to life." She was right. I had been so focused on being the perfect grieving widow, the grateful mother, the woman who needed to be taken care of, that I had forgotten who I really was underneath all those roles. I also started dating William, a widower I met at the book club. He was kind, respectful, and most importantly, he saw me as a complete, capable person, not as someone who needed to be managed or controlled. Our relationship developed, slowly built on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than obligation or manipulation. 6 months after my confrontation with Marcus, I received a letter from him. It was full of apologies and explanations, claims that he had been under stress, that he hadn't meant the things he had said, that he missed me and wanted to rebuild our relationship. But the letter felt hollow, manipulative in a different way. I could read between the lines and see that his life hadn't gone as planned without access to my assets. He and Sarah had apparently broken up. He was struggling financially, and he was hoping to re-establish contact so he could try again to access my money. I didn't respond to the letter. I had learned that forgiveness didn't require me to put myself back in a position to be harmed again. A year after that devastating phone call, I was sitting in my garden on a beautiful spring morning, watching the roses bloom and thinking about how much my life had changed. I had learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all, it's enabling. I had learned that protecting yourself from people who want to hurt you isn't selfish, it's necessary. Most importantly, I had learned that it's never too late to reclaim your power, your dignity, and your right to live life on your own terms. The woman who had answered that accidental phone call a year ago was someone who saw herself through other people's eyes, who measured her worth by how much she could sacrifice for others, who believed that being a good mother meant accepting any treatment from her child. The woman sitting in this garden was someone who knew her own value, who had learned to distinguish between people who loved her and people who wanted to use her, who understood that the most loving thing she could do for herself was refuse to be anyone's victim. I still felt sad sometimes when I thought about the son I had lost. But I no longer felt guilty about protecting myself from the predator he had chosen to become. Some people might say I was too harsh, that I should have given Marcus another chance. But I had learned that some betrayals are so fundamental, so complete, that they change the nature of a relationship forever. Marcus had shown me who he really was when he thought I couldn't hear him. He had revealed that his love was conditional, transactional, and ultimately selfish. That wasn't the kind of love I wanted in my life, even from my own son. I thought about all the years I'd spent believing that being a good mother meant accepting anything from your child, forgiving everything, sacrificing endlessly. Now I understood that real love requires mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The phone call that shattered my illusions about my son had also freed me from a prison of my own making. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, making decisions based on what I wanted rather than what others expected from me. And I had never been happier. As I sat in my garden that morning, surrounded by the beauty I had created and protected. I felt grateful for that accidental phone call. It had hurt more than anything I had ever experienced, but it had also saved me from a lifetime of being manipulated and controlled by someone who saw my love as weakness to be exploited. I was no longer a mother who forgave everything. I was a woman who had learned the difference between love and manipulation, between caring and control, between family and people who happened to share your blood. And I was finally completely free. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was betraying you behind your back? How did you find the strength to protect yourself when it was someone you loved? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is struggling with a similar betrayal. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to always stand up for yourself, no matter who is trying to tear you down.